Morning light spread across the Sentinel Shield security base, heating the cement barriers and mixing with the constant buzz of power units. Guards shuffled through the open area with drowsy movements, fixing equipment, sipping coffee, shaking off sleep. Major Ryan Keller stood at the center, giving brief orders for the upcoming day, his words clear in the still morning. Then a sharp noise split everything apart. Keller stumbled once, hands flying to his neck as red mist sprayed through his fingers. He collapsed before anyone grasped what happened. The quiet lasted just a moment before terror erupted. A second bullet ripped through Captain Luke Harrington's protective vest, throwing him backward into the sand. High up on Revenant Ridge, 800 meters away, weapon flashes sparkled like tiny stars. 8 shooters, working together, accurate, lethal. Guards rushed for safety as communication devices exploded with desperate shouts. Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole slid behind stacked boxes, dirt streaking her face. Corporal Briggs yelled, "Supply girls worthless. Get inside." But Aaron stayed still. She simply stared at the ridge with a calmness the others couldn't understand. They had no idea the woman they mocked once hunted professional shooters for a living. Before we go on, make sure to follow Military and Veteran Stories and share in the comments where are you watching from right now. Dawn had barely risen over the wasteland when the base came alive once more. The same peaceful pattern it followed every morning. The sky changed from navy to amber, brushing the sharp wire with gentle rays as generators thumped in constant loops. Away from the activity of the guards, Staff Sergeant Aaron Cole unlocked the storage building door and stepped through, her figure lean and purposeful, her gray eyes taking a beat to focus before she moved. At 38, she appeared like someone who chose darkness over spotlight. Thin, controlled, and soundless, she walked with a type of measured elegance that most people confused for timidity. She carried no attitude, no confidence, nothing that showed her as anything except average. That was precisely how she preferred it. Inside the storage area, she went directly to her notepad, reviewing supply numbers that she already memorized. Shelves were arranged flawlessly, boxes marked in neat writing. Everything positioned correctly. Organization was meant to be straightforward, reliable, peaceful. Aaron guaranteed it remained that way. Guards passing by tossed light remarks through the entrance, never mean, but never considerate either. Corporal Ethan Briggs leaned in with a grin, tapping his headgear. "Morning notepad, Cole. Rescue the world with paperwork today." Sergeant Mia Lawson laughed as she walked by. "Be kind. She protects our equipment so we don't need to." Aaron simply nodded, acting like the comments bounced off her back. She always acted. She kept her gaze lowered, her stance small, her breathing calm. She moved like a person attempting not to disturb the space around her, but the signs were there for anyone watching carefully. She arranged her workstation so she could observe both doorways without rotating her head. She always picked the corner that offered her a clear view of the storage area's long corridor. When a building crew outside triggered a loud metal bang, she jerked before she could stop herself, eyes jumping to the roof as if measuring direction and range. She breathed out slowly until her pulse settled. Then Travis, the base manager, entered, holding a device thick with requests. He was tall, relaxed, and constantly overwhelmed, glasses sliding down his nose every time he read from his display. "Cole, we've got important people arriving," he said. "Victoria Kane, major tech leader, big standards, little tolerance." He passed her the checklist. Aaron scanned it once, her eyes shifting quickly. Protected chamber, safe communication line, emergency power source, special meals, survival kits, and enough bottled drinks to keep an entire business meeting going. "I'll have it finished by 1600. She then nodded, already believing her word. "I know you will. You always deliver." By mid-morning, she had changed an empty cement room into something secure and efficient. She watched the setup of reinforced windows, checked communication lines herself, reviewed food provisions, tested backup lighting twice, and placed every needed item with silent accuracy. She never hurried. She never wasted energy. Everything she touched settled into the precise spot it belonged. When she brought a container of updated communication devices to the command center, the morning security meeting was already happening. Major Ryan Keller stood at the front, aiming a pointer at a map displayed on the screen. Guards filled the space, some focused, others fighting early tiredness. "This ground here," Keller said, circling the rough shape of Revenant Ridge. "Direct view into our base. If anyone wanted to attack us, this is where they'd position." Erin stopped in the doorway, her eyes pulled to the map. Without planning to, she stepped nearer, studying the landscape with a habit she had spent years attempting to bury. She automatically traced shooting paths, counted range markers, identified blind areas. Her breathing slowed as body memory began whispering through her nerves. The room grew quieter. A few guards noticed her focus. Keller glanced over. "Cole, you need something?" She blinked and stepped back. "Just delivering communication devices, sir." Briggs leaned toward Lawson, barely murmuring, but loud enough for the room to catch. "Look at that. She thinks she's special forces." A few light chuckles floated across the table. Keller shook his head softly. "Thanks, Cole. We've got the combat side handled." She nodded, keeping her face neutral, and left before they could notice how much her hands shook. She hated that her habits still lived beneath her skin, hated that a map like that could pull her straight back into a life she had escaped from. The afternoon brought the important visitor convoy rolling through the entrance, engines heavy and sand rising in thick clouds. Captain Luke Harrington's security team spread out with sharp accuracy, checking rooftops and corners while armored doors opened. Victoria Kane stepped out first, calm and focused, eyes examining the base with frustration. Behind her followed Daniel Brooks, her nervous and sweating chief money officer, and Lauren Price, her helper, gripping a device full of plans. Amanda Reese, her protection leader, held a relaxed stance that said she had experienced dangerous locations before. Guards swarmed the space with practice speed. No one noticed the silent woman standing to the side, arms crossed loosely, watching the routine with a distant calm. Erin never expected them to. By nightfall, the base settled into stillness once more. The wasteland cooled, generators hummed, and lights threw long shadows across the barriers. Erin returned to her small quarters beside the storage building, hoping tiredness would bring sleep. But the instant she shut her eyes, the past rose up once more. A cave opening, the dry smell of sand and rock, a man with a weapon walking back to his position, a small child holding his shirt, her viewing lens centered on the father's body, her finger tightening, her delay lasting one moment too long, and then the shot that killed her partner, the scream she never forgot, the blood on her hands as she tried to stop the impossible. Erin sat up in the darkness, breathing hard. She pressed her palms to her face, whispering to nobody. Not again, never again. First light slid over the wasteland in a slow, pale sweep, throwing long shadows across the cement barriers as the base stirred awake. On the east tower, Carl Jensen sipped lukewarm coffee and examined the horizon through his viewing device. Most mornings were peaceful, just animals, sand and the occasional shepherd. But today something caught his focus. A lone figure stood on Revenant Ridge. He lowered the mug, raised the viewing device again, and focused. The figure didn't move like a hiker or a loop. Whoever it was shifted with accuracy, lowering themselves into a flat position, elbows settling into dirt with practiced confidence. Carl's voice crackled across the radio. "Command, be alert. Possible contact on the ridge." One person flat around 600 meters out. Static answered first, then Keller's voice. "Copy, keep watching. Might be a local." Carl didn't respond right away. Locals didn't lie that motionless. He adjusted the focus and froze when a second figure slid into view, belly crawling behind a rock. Then a third appeared higher up, then another. They spread like dark seeds across the ridge. "Command," Carl said, voice tightening. "We've got more, at least 4, no 5. This is planned." Inside the storage building, Erin Cole stopped mid-step as her radio buzzed with the rising stress. She sat down the box she was moving, walked to the small workstation in the corner, and opened an old laptop she rarely touched. Using a login that IT had once given her just in case, she tapped into the camera feeds. The grainy picture of Revenant Ridge flickered onto her display. Her pulse slowed, not quickened, slowed the way it used to when the world narrowed around a weapon scope. One figure lay perfectly motionless in a position. Another adjusted viewing devices, with careful, clean movements. A third was aligning a support stand, angling the barrel with textbook skill. Erin whispered to herself, "Professional shooters." Then more of them appeared. 6, 7, 8, spaced evenly, overlapping firing zones. High ground completely controlling the base. She leaned closer to the display, counting the meters automatically, the numbers unspooling in her mind like a familiar prayer. 600, 700, 800. No wind yet. Heat shimmer starting low. Good hiding. Perfect killing zone. And they were settling in. Across the base, Keller's voice hardened over radio traffic. All units. Combat ready. Repeat. Full combat ready. Boots hit cement. Guards scrambled to positions. Harrington moved fast, gathering Victoria Kane and her team, leading them toward the protected room. Amanda Reese followed with calculated urgency. Briggs, meanwhile, jogged toward the open area, weapon bouncing against his armor. Probably just locals with old junk weapons. He called out, trying to sound brave, but no one agreed. Not this time. Erin stepped outside the storage building, her eyes locked onto the ridge. Even from here with the naked eye, she saw faint glints of lenses, catching the morning rays. Her breathing settled into a steady pattern she wished she'd forgot. She automatically traced bullet paths, calculated angles, felt an old part of herself waking like a beast, stretching after a long rest. Then the world cracked open. A single shot tore through the air too fast to follow, and Major Ryan Keller fell like someone had cut a string. Blood erupted from his throat in a violent spray, and he collapsed without a sound. The base froze for a fraction of a second. Then chaos exploded. A second round slammed into Captain Harrington's chest plate, breaking ceramic, throwing him backward as the impact echoed through the open air. He gasped on the ground, armor broken like shattered glass. Sergeant Mia Lawson shouted and dove behind a generator as a deflected shot sparked inches from her face. Corporal Briggs, who had been halfway across the open area, dropped into a hard roll, scrambling behind a parked vehicle as rounds hammered the metal. 2 guards near the tower went down in the opening attack, one screaming, one silent. Communication devices erupted with overlapping voices. Person down. Multiple. They're everywhere, taking heavy fire. I can't see them. Where is it coming from? Get the important people inside. Move. Erin ducked behind a cement barrier as bullets snapped overhead, slicing the air with violent whips. Sand hit her face. Gravel bit into her palms and her mind shifted. Not panicked, not shocked. She went cold, focused. Every habit she had buried roared to the surface, demanding control. Memories flickered. Short, sharp bursts of memories she couldn't stop. Patrick Coleman whispering corrections beside her. A cave entrance, 600 meters away. The man with the weapon. The child standing beside him. Her delay. Patrick falling. Blood she couldn't stop. She blinked hard, pulling herself back. Voices screamed on the radio again. Among them she heard Brian Hutchkins, calm father of 2, always showing photos of his kids, gasping, his voice thin and breaking. Hit. Chest. Can't breathe. Someone help. Another crack echoed. His voice went silent. Erin shut her eyes for half a moment. Then something inside her snapped. Not wildly, not emotionally, but with cold accuracy, like a switch being flipped after years locked away. She grabbed her radio. "Warren," she said quietly. The medic's voice was frantic. "Cole, what are you doing? Get inside. I can end this." Her voice was calm, too calm. Guards overheard and fell silent on the channel. Warren hesitated. "What do you mean end this?" Erin wiped sand from her cheek with the back of her hand. She looked toward the ridge, toward 8 professionals who thought they owned the battlefield. "I'm former Special Forces counter shooter," she said. "Give me covering fire." The channel went completely quiet. Warren finally breathed out, shaky and disbelieving. "You're what?" But she didn't repeat herself. Through distant gunfire, her voice remained steady as steel. "Give me covering fire." It was the tone of someone giving an order she had given before. Warren reacted first. Maybe habit, maybe desperation. Maybe he heard something true in her voice. "All units," he shouted, "lay down covering fire on Revenant Ridge. Now." Guards obeyed right away, unloading everything they had at the ridge. Sand explosions burst along the high ground. The shooters ducked behind safety, forced to pause their attack. Erin took her chance. She ran, not hesitantly, not panicked, but with the fierce, calculated motion of someone who had sprinted through real killing zones before. She zigzagged across open ground, timing her movements between the rhythm of incoming fire. Bullets tore into dirt behind her boots, snapped past her shoulder, sparked off metal, but she never slowed. Every step was a memory. Every turn was body memory. Every breath was a reminder of the person she once was and the person she had to become again. She reached the weapons room door just as a round slammed into the wall beside her, spraying cement chips across her arms. She hit the keypad, shoved the door open, and disappeared inside, heart steady, hands already knowing precisely which weapon she would reach for. The battle outside raged on. But the real war, the one only she could fight, was about to begin. Erin slammed the weapons room door behind her, breath steady, the outside chaos muffled by thick steel barriers. The overhead lights flickered once as sand drifted off her shoulders. She took 3 steps inside before realizing she wasn't alone. Linda Crawford, the admin worker who handled access records, stood frozen beside a shelf of medical kits, a notepad clutched to her body. Her eyes widened as Erin strode past her without pause. "Cole, what are you doing?" Linda whispered, voice shaking. Erin didn't answer. She moved straight to the restricted keypad mounted on the inner cage, an override panel only leadership used. Without pausing, she punched in a code Linda had never seen her type, her fingers moving with absolute certainty. Beep, green light. Click. The cage unlocked. Linda's mouth fell open in shock. "How? How do you know that code?" But Erin was already moving inside, weaving through boxes and racks with the unthinking ease of someone who had lived in weapons rooms far more dangerous than this one. She stopped precisely where she knew the weapon would be, the M210, the gun she had tried to forget, her hand wrapped around the stock in one smooth, practiced motion. She didn't search, didn't look around, didn't pause. She simply reached for it like an extension of her own body. Linda stepped back, whispering, "Oh my God." Erin ignored the rising panic in the woman's voice. She lifted the weapon, checked the chamber blind with her thumb, and loaded the magazine with a soft, efficient click. Her fingers danced over the scope, adjusting settings by habit. She didn't even look at the numbers. Her breathing slowed, each inhale accurate, each exhale measured. Professional shooter breathing. Breathing she had sworn she'd never fall back into. She paused only once when her hand hovered over the bolt. A tremor ran through her fingers. A memory slipped forward. Patrick lying in Afghan sand, blood pooling under his cheek. The echo of the shot she didn't take. Her jaw tightened. The moment passed. She closed the bolt quietly, like sealing away the ghost with it. Her radio crackled. It was Warren Blake, voice shaking under pressure, but holding steady for the wounded around him. "Cole, say the word." She glanced at the ridge through the weapons room's small window. Guards were still firing blindly, trying to keep the shooters' heads down, but blind bullets weren't going to win this. She lifted the radio to her lips. "Cease fire in 10 seconds. Silence followed her command. A heavy, confused silence, then distant shouting as guards relayed the order. Phil from IT, listening on an open channel, whispered, "Why is she giving commands?" Mia Lawson in the battered tower whispered back, "How does she know any of this? How was she this calm?" Erin slung the weapon tight and sprinted out of the weapons room. She ran across the base's inner yard, ducking low as stray rounds snapped overhead. Then she slipped into the management building, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Each step echoed faintly, the sound oddly steady, almost peaceful compared to the chaos outside. By the time she reached the top floor, her face had changed completely. Gone was the quiet, unassuming supply worker who counted ammunition boxes and stocked water supplies. In her place was something sharper, calmer, colder, An old version of herself she had spent years suppressing. Her face carried a heavy acceptance, as if she knew she was crossing a line she could never uncross. Yet her eyes held a steadiness that felt carved from steel. Down below, guards noticed the shift without understanding it. Briggs, still crouched behind the vehicle, looked up and saw her moving along the walkway toward the rooftop ladder. He frowned, unable to place the feeling climbing up his spine. Lawson murmured into her microphone, "She's different." Warren whispered back, "No, she's trained." The shooters on the ridge were no longer firing into the base. They had gone still, waiting for visibility through the haze, waiting to resume their assault with cold patience. Their temporary silence settled over the wasteland, like a held breath. Aaron climbed the final ladder, pushing open the metal hatch to the roof, as the last echoes of covering fire faded. 800 meters away, Revenant Ridge loomed quiet and deadly, its hidden killers repositioning in the shadows. The stress crawled across the base like static electricity. This was no longer chaos. This was the pause before the real fight. And Aaron Cole, supply worker, ghost of special forces, the woman no one believed in, stepped into the open air with the calm of an apex predator, who had finally accepted what she was about to do. The ridge waited. She lifted the weapon. The wasteland held its breath. Aaron slid onto the rooftop, the heat of the metal seeping through her elbows, as she crawled behind the low retaining barrier. The base stretched below her, guards scrambling, sand clouds rising, broken shouts crackling over the radios. Revenant Ridge dominated the horizon, jagged and baked by sun, its shadows hiding 8 professionals, who believed no one in the valley could touch them. She set the M210 against her shoulder. The familiar weight settled into her bones. The world tightened into a tunnel. Scope, sight picture, breath, trigger. Everything else faded. Her cheek pressed to the stock. The eye relief was perfect on the first try. Her right hand slid under the weapon with the same gentle certainty of someone who had done it thousands of times. Her left adjusted the support stand angle. Her breathing slowed into that old mechanical rhythm she thought she'd buried in the Afghan mountains. Inhale 2 seconds. Exhale steady. She swept the scope along the ridge in one smooth, fluid motion. There. The first shoot, only a fraction of a shoulder, peeked from behind a rock, barely enough to see, much less hit. But Aaron didn't blink. She didn't hesitate. She listened to the wind with her skin, felt the temperature shift on the rooftop, watched how the rising heat warped the air near the ground. Wind 3 knots left, heat shimmer pulling slightly upward, range 670 meters. She dialed the correction without thinking. She breathed out halfway, triggered. The weapon cracked, a deep controlled thunder that rolled across the base. 2 seconds later, the shooter's shoulder vanished. The man collapsed backward out of sight. A perfect first-round kill. Communication devices across the base went completely silent. In the open area, Briggs froze mid-reload. "What was that?" Lawson whispered. "That came from the admin roof." Aaron didn't hear them. She was already on target too. This one was smart. Buried behind thick brush. Careful angles, barely any outline. She caught movement. A single leaf shifting from the pressure of his clothing. As he adjusted his weapon, that was all she needed. Inhale. Exhale. Trigger. A puff of leaves jumped as the round passed through. The shooter's body slumped sideways into the brush. 2 shots. 2 kills. Below her, Mia Lawson nearly dropped her radio. Is someone actually hitting them?" Phil from IT whispered. Stunned. "That's impossible. We can't even see them." But Aaron could. She saw everything. She moved to shooter 3. This one was relocating. Smart move. Trying to change height to avoid return fire. But movement was always a shooter's enemy. He darted between 2 boulders, planning to settle on the far edge. Aaron watched his predicted path. She calculated his speed, the slope, the short pause he'd take before settling. She fired before he emerged. The round met him mid-step. The man's body folded unnaturally as he crumpled between the rocks. Guards watching through viewing devices went silent with shock. "Whoever's doing that, that's not normal shooting." Briggs breathed. Aaron kept moving. 4 shooters left hidden, 3 exposed. 1 invisible. Number 4 was the invisible one. He was good. Too good. He had dug himself into a depression behind a flat slab of stone, using natural shadow and landscape to vanish. A professional, someone trained like she was trained. Maybe better. Erin scanned slowly, patiently. She adjusted zoom, shifted her angle, waited for any sign. A glint, the faintest shimmer of a scope lens catching morning light for just a heartbeat. Got waned, rising to 5 knots. Heat shimmer stronger. Range 723 meters. High accuracy shot. Her breath stilled. Patrick's voice washed through her memory. Calm, low, steady behind her. You've got it. Don't chase the shimmer. Chase the certainty behind the shimmer. She aligned the shot precisely where he would have told her. Triggered. The glint disappeared instantly. A dark shape rolled sideways in the dirt. 4 down. A tremor touched her fingers, not from nerves but from the ghost that had returned to sit beside her shoulder. Patrick's face flickered behind her eyes again. Sand in his hair, blood on his neck. The last warning he tried to give her before collapsing. She swallowed it down. She couldn't break now. Shooters 5 and 6 had clearly realized something was very wrong. They abandoned their positions and sprinted upslope, trying to escape over the ridge crest. Their panic made them sloppy. Erin tracked the first runner with smooth accuracy. He ran straight away. Easy math. She led him by a few feet, timing his stride and the rise of the hill. He pitched forward, face first into the dirt. The second runner tried to move sideways, smart enough to use landscape undulation for partial safety. But Erin watched his rhythm, the way he favored his left foot, the moment he'd have to break from one rock to the next. She fired the instant he crossed open space. He dropped before even understanding that someone was hunting them. 6 down. Below her, guards stared in disbelief. Briggs's voice shook. That's not possible. Nobody shoots like that. Lawson murmured. She's not who we thought. Still, Erin didn't hear them. She was already tracking Shooter 7, the one trying to escape over the highest part of the ridge. This one was nearly 800 meters out, pushing the limits of even the best shooters. Heat shimmer curled the air. Sand swirled. Small rises in the landscape distorted the sight picture. But Erin adjusted. She slowed her breathing until her heartbeat barely lifted her chest. She adjusted the elevation turret 4 clicks. Corrected for heat shimmer. Calculated bullet drop automatically. It wasn't math. It was art. She squeezed the trigger. 2 seconds later, the figure at the ridge crest jerked violently and fell backward out of view. 7. Only one remained. He was buried deep. So deep even Erin couldn't initially spot him. His position was perfect. A shadowed depression behind 2 overlapping rocks that shielded any direct visual. For a moment, she scanned carefully, frustration flickering at the edges of her calm. Then Mia's voice crackled through the radio. Breath. I've got thermal marking location with tracers. Watch the right side of the ridge. A line of green tracer fire arced upward, stitching between 2 stones. Erin aimed at the bracketed zone. The last shooter hesitated for 1 fatal second, trying for a revenge shot, shifting just enough to find a line of sight on one of the guards below. That motion exposed half of his forearm. That was all she needed. The final shooter's arm snapped back violently as he collapsed into the dirt. Sand puffed where he fell. The tracer fire stopped. Silence washed across the base. Real silence. No gunfire, no shouting. Just dry wind creeping over the barriers. Then the voices started, shaky, disbelieving. 8 shots. 8 kills. Who is she? Briggs's voice trembled. That was impossible. Someone else whispered. She's not supply. She's something else. Down below, every guard looked toward the rooftop, as if seeing it for the first time. Respect hadn't replaced doubt yet. Not fully, but it was moving, building, rising like a tide. They couldn't hold back. They didn't know the full truth. Not yet. But they knew one thing. The quiet supply worker they ignored had just eliminated a nightmare team of elite shooters, in less than 12 minutes, and nothing about the world felt the same anymore. Erin stayed flat behind the low barrier long after the final shooter dropped. Her breathing stayed slow, steady, accurate. She scanned every inch of Revenant Ridge through her scope, refusing to trust silence too quickly. Sand drifted across the rocks. Heat shimmered. No movement. No glint of glass. No shifting outline. Only 8 still forms lying in the sand, swallowed by distance. Finally, she eased her finger off the trigger and lifted her cheek from the stock, but she didn't stand. Not yet. A professional shooter always watched a little longer. Boots clattered on the metal ladder behind her. Warren Blake pulled himself onto the rooftop, shoulders heaving from the climb. Medical gloves still stained from the wounded he had just treated. He froze when he saw her. The calm posture, the weapon at rest beside her, the face of someone who hadn't just survived a fight, but mastered it. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Cole, who trained you?" She didn't look up at him right away. She watched the ridge one last time, then finally rose to her knee. Her face was unreadable, but something old and heavy had settled behind her eyes. "Special Forces," she said quietly. 6 years. Counter-shooter detail. Warren's lips parted slightly as if the words didn't want to process. His gaze flicked from her hands to the weapon to the ridge where 8 bodies lay cooling. "Jesus," he breathed. Below the rooftop, guards gathered, drawn by Warren's stunned silence and the eerie stillness from above. Mia Lawson was first to reach the base of the ladder, eyes narrowed as she stared upward. Briggs arrived seconds later, helmet crooked, sand smeared across his jaw. Others clustered behind them, staring at the roof like it was sacred ground. Mia whispered, She's Special Forces." Briggs didn't answer. His face drained as pieces fell into place. The jokes, the dismissals, the times he'd laughed at her back. His head lowered, shoulders sinking as shame carved into him. "She saved every one of us," he muttered, "and I treated her like she didn't belong." Footsteps approached from the open area. Swift, sharp, urgent. Amanda Reese, the important visitors' security leader, pushed through the crowd and stopped dead when she saw Erin rising from behind the barrier. Her breath caught, her hand lifting slightly as if to steady herself. Reese stared. Then recognition struck her like a hammer. "I know you," she whispered. I've seen your file." Erin didn't move, didn't confirm, didn't deny. Reese stepped closer to the ladder, her voice barely audible. "You're the one they called Ghostline." A hush rippled through the open area. That name, spoken quietly, reverently, fearfully, hit the guards like a shockwave. Ghostline, a code name whispered in certain circles, a myth among counter-shooter units, a rumor about a shooter who never missed, who erased threats others couldn't even see. Every head turned upward, every voice stilled. The truth settled over the base like sand after a bomb blast. She wasn't the supply worker. She wasn't the quiet woman in the storage building. She wasn't the forgettable background figure people brushed past without notice. She was one of the most lethal counter-shooters the United States had ever produced. A woman who disappeared from classified reports years ago. Assumed retired. Assumed gone. Yet here she was on a rooftop in the wasteland, holding a weapon that still smoked faintly from the shot that had saved them all. And in that stunned silence, awe replaced doubt, respect replaced mockery, and the entire base felt the weight of who had just revealed herself. Ghostline wasn't a myth, she was real, and she had just saved their lives. Erin descended the ladder slowly, boots touching each rung with controlled, careful steadiness. The weapon hung across her chest, still warm. Below, a gathering of guards stepped back automatically, parting down the middle without speaking, forming a quiet path she hadn't asked for. No one made eye contact at first, not out of fear, out of reverence. Captain Luke Harrington, pale and fighting to stay upright with a shattered chest plate, pushed himself against the side of a vehicle. His breath hitched, but he managed to straighten just enough to bring his hand to his brow. A salute, trembling but genuine. The open area froze. Slowly, one by one, others followed. Mia Lawson, Carl Jensen, Todd Garrett, Even the youngest of the team, whose hands still shook from the firefight. Their salutes rose, unevenly, some crisp, some heavy with emotion, but all pointed toward the woman they had once ignored. Erin paused at the bottom of the ladder. She didn't return the gesture, not right away. Her eyes drifted past them toward the far end of the open area, where medics knelt beside still bodies covered with tarps. Major Keller, Brian Hutchkins, two others who hadn't made it to safety in time. The sight pulled her breath in tight, her chest aching with the familiar weight she had carried from another battlefield years ago. She finally raised her hand in a slow, respectful return salute, one meant for the fallen, not for herself. Briggs stepped forward last. Sand streaked his face. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. He swallowed hard before he spoke, voice small for the first time since anyone had met him. "Ma'am, I'm sorry." He looked at the ground. "I didn't know. I didn't." Erin shook her head gently. "You weren't supposed to," she said. Her tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't cold. It was soft, almost tired. "I chose to stay hidden. The jokes didn't hurt me. They reminded me that I wasn't her anymore." Briggs blinked quickly, fighting emotion. "But you came back for us." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. A distant thumping rose above the base, the chopping rhythm of helicopter blades. Guards automatically stepped aside as a black Sentinel Shield helicopter descended in a swirl of sand. When it landed, the door slid open, and Regional Director Samuel Walsh stepped out, his suit jacket whipping in the rotor wash. Walsh scanned the open area like a man entering a war zone, and then his gaze locked onto Erin. His brows drew together, confusion shifting to disbelief, as he noticed the weapon in her hands, the guards standing back, the bodies on the ridge now visible in the distance. "What happened here?" he demanded, voice sharp. Warren Blake stepped forward. "Sir," she did. Walsh stared at Erin as though seeing a ghost. "Cole, explain." She didn't hesitate. She stood straighter, shifting the weapon to her side. Her voice became clinical, detached, not cold, just disciplined. "First shooter, 670 yards, minimal exposure, neutralized by wind-corrected shoulder shot. Second shooter concealed behind brush, visible shift of plants. Third shooter caught mid-reposition. Fourth scope glint. Fifth and sixth fleeing. Predicted movement. Led targets accordingly. Seventh, 800-yard crest, shot with elevation and heat shimmer compensation. Eighth, thermal bracket from tower input. Fired when target repositioned for second shot." Each sentence was crisp, precise, undecorated. Guards watched the regional director's face tighten with every detail, shock hardening into awe. Walsh looked back toward the ridge, toward 8 distant specks that had once been elite killers. "You eliminated all of them?" he asked quietly. Erin nodded once. "They would have killed everyone here if I didn't." Walsh breathed out slowly, heavily, like someone who finally understood the magnitude of what he was standing in the middle of. "Everyone on this base is alive because of you," he said. The open area went silent again. Even the helicopter rotors seemed to hush. Erin didn't bow her head in pride. She didn't straighten in triumph. Her gaze stayed fixed on the bodies covered by tarps. "I couldn't save everyone," she whispered. "Not this time either." A shadow crossed Walsh's face, sympathy mixed with realization. She wasn't some storage worker with a good shot. She was a legend who had tried to disappear, a warrior who had fled from herself, a name buried in classified files and whispered in briefing room. And now, with 8 bodies on a ridge and a base full of stunned guards, her old identity stood fully exposed. Ghostline was no longer a myth. She was standing right in front of them, holding the weapon that proved precisely who she really was. The base was quiet by late afternoon, the kind of quiet that felt too heavy to breathe. Medics had carried the wounded inside. Teams had secured the perimeter. Guards spoke in hushed voices, still replaying what they'd witnessed. But Erin walked alone. She followed the same path the attack had carved, her boots crunching over gravel and spent casings. When she reached the spot where Major Keller had fallen, she stopped. A dark stain marked the ground, dried now but still raw to look at. Keller had trusted this team, trusted the ridge, trusted the morning. She closed her eyes for a moment in silent respect, the weight of memory settling deeper across her shoulders. Farther along, she found Brian Hutchkins's helmet lying on its side, sand coating the surface. His name tape was still visible. She knelt, brushing the dirt gently away. Brian had talked about his kids every chance he got. 2 little ones. One had a birthday coming up. Erin swallowed hard, placing the helmet upright before rising again. Her steps took her to the furthest edge of the base, where the barrier cast a long shadow. From there, Revenant Ridge stretched across the horizon, its jagged outline sharp against the sky. 8 bodies still lay motionless, waiting for retrieval teams to arrive. In the still air, they looked like dark stones scattered across the ridge. She let out a breath that trembled at the edges. "Patrick," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry it took me this long." The ridge didn't answer. It never, but she felt something shift inside her, an ache she had carried for years, loosening just enough to breathe through. She leaned her hands against the warm cement. She had tried to bury that part of her life, tried to hide in organization, stacking boxes, and arranging shelves as if order could erase memory. She told herself she wasn't a weapon anymore, that she couldn't be trusted with one. But today had shattered that illusion. When people needed her, habit rose, training returned. The old reflexes stepped forward without asking for permission. She had become the thing she feared most, the shooter who never missed. But she had also saved them. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through trembling hands and quiet resolve. Strength isn't always visible. Sometimes it hides behind humble sleeves and silent footsteps. And some heroes walk quietly among us, unnoticed, underestimated, until the moment they're needed most. Erin lifted her gaze to the ridge one last time. Then she turned back toward the base, ready to carry the weight of who she truly was. Some of the greatest warriors you'll ever meet look like ordinary people. They don't brag, they don't boast. They move through the world quietly, carrying their battles in silence, until the moment someone's life depends on them. And when that moment comes, they step forward without hesitation, guided not by glory, but by a promise they made long ago. Stories like Erin's remind us that courage often wears the simplest uniforms, that strength can live behind soft voices and unseen scars, and that the heroes we overlook are sometimes the ones who save us all. To every service member and veteran watching, thank you. Your sacrifices, your discipline, and your quiet acts of courage continue to protect and inspire us. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories. These stories keep their courage alive for generations to come.